I don't like it, Iron Gull says, eyeing the door. It doesn't matter if you like it or not, says the lieutenant. There is power beneath our feet, and if the Kingswood are our enemies, we can't let them keep it. I agree, but kicking down a door in this establishment isn't going to win us any friends. Lophalia's smile is all teeth, and as she stands, she says, I don't make friends. Iron Gull stands as well and says, At least let me call in the others. We're spread too thin around Veilwater. No, I'm doing this now. She makes her way through the inn toward the heavy wooden door at the back of the room. There aren't many of Veilwater's citizens in the inn at this hour, but a few eyes watch her progress. Iron Gull follows with Kine and Hadron on his heels. He waves to the other crest to remain seated. The bartender, Stilton, steps out from behind the bar and says, Can I help you? His words sail past the lieutenant as she reaches a hand out for the door. It does not budge. Again, Stilton says, Excuse me, do you need something? Before Lophalia turns to address him, Iron Gull says, Stand back, lad. Trust me, you don't want any part of this. The bartender meets his eyes, and there is a weariness there. You can't go in there. I understand your concern, Iron Gull says, but being frank, you can't stop us. Stilton shakes his head. No, you don't understand. No one goes in there. Even I've never seen what's behind that door. I don't think it'll open. As if in response, Lophalia speaks a word, and the air in the room changes, growing thicker, heavier. Just as quickly, that feeling dissipates and the door hisses open. Lophalia turns to Stilton and says, You were saying? The bartender stares, jaw working. Then he steps back, hands raised in defeat. Iron Gull nods and steps past, following the lieutenant through the open door. They descend a flight of steps until they pass the stonework and enter an earthen chamber. Almost immediately, Iron Gull feels his stomach churn. It's an unfamiliar feeling for an old soldier, and he says, Brigade's 10, what is that? Lophalia says, An artifact of decay and corruption. And there it floats, a fleshy orb in the center of this loamy cavern. It hums with a sickly green aura, and for a brief moment Iron Gull thinks he hears whispering, though he cannot make out what the voices say. As the lieutenant approaches it, Iron Gull says, Does it belong with the one we took from the Defara estate? Lophalia is silent as she studies the thing. Iron Gull grunts and is about to say something else when he hears a commotion upstairs. Shouts, and the sounds of weapons clashing descend the steps. Almost in concert, the artifact pulses and thrums. Iron Gull barely keeps the food in his stomach. Hadron isn't so lucky. Iron Gull, to me, Lophalia says, and when the sergeant looks at her, he sees something he's never seen before. A sheen of sweat on her perfect skin. The shouting continues above, and then figures begin descending. They aren't crest. Iron Gull barely makes out the sigil of the Royal Dispatch Company. Kine, Hadron, guard the steps, Iron Gull calls out, drawing his sword. Kine and Hadron, old hands in the crest, stand shoulder to shoulder in the cavern entry, blades bared and ready as the first Kingsword crash into them. There's a brief flash of steel and the Kingsword fall, but there are more behind them, and the two crest soldiers are pushed back. A half-dozen Kingsword force their way into the cavern, but the crest are well accustomed to facing greater numbers. They retreat enough to allow Iron Gull space to put his blade to work as well. Steel crashes and echoes, men grunt and gasp, and then The Kingsword lay dead at their feet. Chest heaving, Irongull turns to check on his soldiers. But before he can speak, Lephalia cries out and sinks to her knees. Through gritted teeth, she says again, "To me." The artifact is thrumming faster now, and the whispers Irongull thought he heard before have become a persistent murmur. Without hesitation, Irongull and the two Crest soldiers rush to her side. Eyes closed, she raises her hands above her head, and a barrier of magical energy surrounds them. The artifact's thrumming is too fast to count, and then, like a ripple in a pond, that sickly green energy explodes from the artifact and washes over them. Lephalia whimpers, but the barrier holds. Irongull and the others watch the dead Kingsword twist and decay, and then come the screams from above. Screams that soon resolve to silence. The only sound that remains is their own labored breathing here, deep in the earth. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, we return to a broader view of Heartvale with another faction turn. Find out what happens on episode 34, War and Peace. Well, it certainly has been an interesting couple episodes as we wandered off to explore an Alfheim ruin, and we learned some more about Vargosh and discovered a new artifact. And apparently some stuff went down while Ben, Arid, and Orchid were away doing that mission. So it is time for another faction turn, so we can sort of see where things are as we come back to Veilwater and Heartvale proper. As we pick up with our faction turn, once again, I have 6 factions in the city. There's the Crest, the Vidala family, the Shade, the Drift, the Kingsword, and Lord DeSoto. And I'm going to roll a d8 to give each of them an initiative, and then we're going to walk through the faction turn, faction by faction. So here we go. We'll start off with the Crest. They get a 2 on the d8. The Vidala get a 7. The Shade get an 8. The Drift get a 5. The Kingsword also get a 7, and Lord DeSoto gets a 1. All right. Which means that the Shade are going to act first in this faction turn. So the way that the faction turn goes is we start off by earning some treasure that's equal to half their wealth plus a quarter of their combined force and cunning, the total being rounded up. So I have a wealth of 3 and a cunning and force combined of 6. So 6 divided by 4 is going to be 1.5, and then rounded up will be 2. So they're going to earn 5 treasure, which is going to add on to the 8 treasure that they already have, giving them 13 treasure to work with. Now they have 3 assets. They have vigilant assets, which give them the opportunity to look for stealthed assets. They have petty seers, which is a cadre of skilled fortune tellers and minor oracles that have been enlisted by the faction to foresee perils and allow swift counterattacks. And then they have an arcane laboratory. The faction's magic is counted as stronger than it normally would be. So currently, as we look at our map here, they have their vigilant agents in the north scales. Their laboratory is in the north howl, and their petty seers are in the south howl. I think we need to once again ask a question of the fate chart, and I'm going to set the chaos factor at 7 again, because I think there is a decent amount of chaos here in the city. And the thing that we have to ask is, do they know where the Vidala family are? And the last time I asked this, I thought it was unlikely that they did, and in fact they did not. But now we know there is a shade in Davenar who has been observing the Vidala family's actions at that temple. So I think that bumps it up to 50-50. So once again, 50-50 with a chaos rank of 7. We're back to the Mythic GM Emulator fate chart. 35 is a yes. So yes, they do know that the Vidala are located currently in Davenar, and I think that's going to be very important going forward. Now, the other thing is we also know that the Kingsword are somehow tied up in this. They at least assassinated a shade, and I think that probably pisses off the shade a decent amount. And so I think the action that the shade is going to take for this turn is to create an asset. So when you create an asset, the faction buys one asset at a location where they have a base of influence. That would be in the North Howl. They must have the minimum attribute and magic ratings necessary to buy the asset and must pay the listed cost in treasure to build it. A faction can create only one asset per turn. So what kind of asset are they going to create? I think this is going to be someone that they can send against the Kingsword. So as I'm looking at the different list of assets, there is on the cunning section an occult infiltrator. So let's take a look at who they are. Magically gifted spies and assassins are enlisted to serve the faction. Occult infiltrator assets always begin play with the stealth quality. So I think I'm going to purchase them as an asset. So that's going to cost 6 treasure. That is going to go on our cunning list here. So these stealthed infiltrators are going to enter the faction turn in North Howl at the Von Tryken estate, which is where the Shade are based. I think because they're occult infiltrators, these are agents of the Shade that are already part of the group. They're already trained, everything like that. What happens here is Lady Von Tryken, the Red Fox, draws a few of these to her, and all of the Shades carry these magically imbued coins. And she, along with a couple other mages in her employ, are going to imbue those coins with the mystical ability to avoid detection and possibly to even cloak their presence so that these infiltrators can truly infiltrate the Kingsword. And I think the tie here between rolling on the fate chart for the information on the Vidala family and this operation against the Kingsword is that Lady Von Tryken sends information to the crest that the Vidala family are located in Davenar. And I think Because the Crest are mercenaries, they are going to be better equipped to send units to Davenar rather than sending actual naval or military units that are directly connected to Heartvale. Seeing as recently there was a war between Heartvale and Davenar, I think the Red Fox is wary about sending any of her assets to do this dirty work against the Vidala family, because if it goes poorly, then I think they are going to possibly spark another war between Davenar and Heartvale. Whereas if a group of mercenaries go in there, there's a little bit less of a politically charged nature to it. So that being said, I think we are going to create that asset of the infiltrators, and the Red Fox is going to plan to send them against Ephron Fellheart's Royal Dispatch Company. And I think depending on how things go, their mission may be to infiltrate and determine what the Kingsword operatives are up to, or it may be as straightforward as get in and assassinate Ephron Fellheart. So we'll see how that plays out in the future. But for the moment, the Shade have recruited these occult infiltrators and are ready to send them against the Royal Dispatch Company. That is it for their turn. So we are going to go ahead and move on to our next one, which is going to be the Vidala family or the Royal Dispatch Company. And I think I'm just going to roll a d6. If it's 1 to 3, it will be the Vidala family. If it's 4 to 6, it'll be the Kingsword are going to go first. 6. So that is going to be the Kingsword. Now with the Kingsword, we are sitting in a more interesting position. They are incredibly wealthy. They have 13 treasure already, and we are going to add 6 plus 2, 8 more to that. So that's going to take them up to 21 treasure. Now their mission, their desired goal here is wealth of kingdoms. And what that means is that they have to spend treasure equal to 4 times the faction's wealth rating on bribes and influence. This money is effectively lost, but the goal is then considered accomplished. The faction's wealth rating must increase before this goal can be selected again. And currently I have spent 8 wealth on this. So I'm going to think about that as we go through the turn, because I think they're going to spend more treasure on that faction goal this turn as we try to continue to spread the wealth around Heartvale. And then we're going to look at their assets. They have a number of assets. They have a Spy Master, which is, I think, representative of Ephron Fellheart himself. They have Useful Idiots, which are basically able to take on the consequences of a successful attack from a different faction. They have a Trade Company, which has hit points, and they're able to roll against that asset to gain treasure. Pleaders, which are basically your lawyers, scalds, law speakers, and other specialists, they've already been used to sort of try to turn public opinion against various factions in the city. And then there's the Manufactory. Once per turn, as a free action, you can roll 1d6. I'm going to do this right now. On a 1 point of treasure is lost. On a 2 to 5, 1 is gained. On a 6, 2 are gained. It's a 5, so 1 point of treasure is gained. That's going to take them to 22 treasure. And I think that represents the continued fabrication of news and information in the city of Heartvale. So if we look at the map of Heartvale, we currently have a lot going on in Bright Scales. So in the North Scales, we have the Spy Master and the Trade Company and the Manufactory. That's where the headquarters of the Royal Dispatch Company is. And then in the South Scales, we have the Pleaders and the Useful Idiots. What do I want to do here? Because I think because the Royal Dispatch Company, led by Ephron Fellheart, has realized that the Crest have taken out their stone thrower thugs because Gimbal survived and escaped and was able to get back and warn the Royal Dispatch Company of this course of events. I think that Fellheart is interested in dislodging the Crest from their position here in Heartvale. So I think he's going to attack their faction. And he's going to attack the faction with his pleaders. And so these pleaders are going to make a cunning attack versus the wealth of the Crest. So I'm going to roll 2d10, and this is going to be a cunning of 5 versus a wealth of 2 for the Crest. So the cunning of 5. Ooh, it's an 8 on the die, so that is going to be a 13, which is bad news for the Crest. And it is going to be 5 for the Crest's result. And I think this is going against the actual base of influence, the Crow's Nest, as these pleaders are trying to convince the council to basically rescind the writ of welcoming that the Crest received to be here in the city. And I don't know if Captain Netheridge is going to interpose the infantry in this as a sort of way to basically keep people away. I'm thinking of it from a standpoint of okay, if this is successful, then they're sending representatives of the government to deliver letters to Captain Netheridge to basically tell him to move his base of operations. But if those letters never arrive, then how can the Crest be held accountable for not moving their base of operations? So I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to interpose the infantry in this, and we are going to roll 2d4's worth of damage. This could knock out one of my units of infantry. So the first one is 3 damage. So yeah, this infantry is gone. And the second one is going to be 1 point of damage. So that infantry is completely wiped out. So I had 2 units of infantry. And I think that what that means in the fiction is Netheridge uses soldiers of the Crest to waylay and maybe even beat senseless the messengers and steal the letters and get rid of them. But he's basically burning up those people as assets in the city and has to send them, much like he did with Ben, Arid, and the others, has to send them out of the city to get away from the wrath of the city council. But fortunately, that damage doesn't go to the hit points of the Crest. He is basically able to use brute force to turn away the ire of the Kingsword attackers, the pleaders, who are trying to drive at the heart of the Crest, the Crow's Nest. But I don't think we're done there either, because when you attack, you can attack with any and all of your assets that are able to attack. And we have the Spymaster in the North Scales, and there are the Shade's Vigilant Agents. And I think that those Vigilant Agents are probably going to get targeted. The question is, can they be targeted because they have the subtle trait? So subtle looks like they just can't be kept from moving into an area that has some sort of protections that would keep a unit from moving into it. So there is a difference between subtle and stealthed. So because of that, I think the Spymaster is going to strike out at those Vigilant Agents. And we are going to do a cunning versus cunning attack with the Spymaster. So the Kingsword have a cunning of 5. +1 on the die is a 6. The Shade have a cunning of 4. +5 is a 9. So these vigilant agents are able to evade the attacks of the Kingsword. And I think what this looks like is Kingsword operatives leave the headquarters of the Royal Dispatch Company in the North Scales, and there are Shade operatives who are watching. And these Kingsword operatives are hunting them, but the Shade melt away into the crowds that are around the scales. And in fact, I think a few of those Kingsword operatives don't come back because since the Shade were successfully able to defeat that attack, they get to deal 1d4 of counterattack damage. Oh, and they deal 4 points of damage, and that goes directly to the Spy Master. So the Spy Master has 4 hit points. So I guess we have to ask the question then, is the Spy Master representative of Ephraim Fellheart as the leader of the faction? Or is that someone who is running the operation for him? I think it's got to be the latter, but, nothing is for certain here in Heartvale. So let's ask the fate chart. I think it's impossible that this Spy Master is actually representative of Ephraim Fellheart and his, hit points, because, well, let's just admit, narratively speaking, it's much more interesting if he survives for a grand confrontation somewhere down the line. But we're going to roll the dice. I'm going to say it's impossible, but that's still, a 15% chance of getting a yes. Is the Spy Master representative of Ephraim Fellheart, or is the Spy Master an operative that works directly for Fellheart? 6 is a yes. Yes, it is representative of Ephraim Fellheart. Okay, so here's an interesting question. I was not expecting this. Is he dead, or is he taken off the board for the moment? And what I mean by that is this faction turn has very sort of regimented steps. And so 4 damage is enough to wipe out the Spy Master. So that asset is going to go away, which means they're not going to be able to use it in the future. And I think that means that they get Fellheart. They hurt him, but he is not dead. So once again, I'm going to say the question is he dead? And I think it's impossible again. So chaos factor of 7. 18, which is just barely a no. So not only is he still alive, he is, I think, grievously wounded in a counter assassination. I'll have to think about that. Maybe there's a scene to play out for that. But in the meantime, what this means is that the Spy Master asset is actually wiped out. It's wiped off the board. Returning to the faction turn here, the Kingsword have unsuccessfully struck at the Shade. Very unsuccessfully, all things considered. And that is going to end their turn, but I'm going to spend 10 treasure to take this up to 18. They would need to get to 24 in order to accomplish this. So I don't want to spend all of the wealth right now. So yeah, I'm going to go with 10. That'll take it up to 18 wealth. So they have not fulfilled the goal yet, but they are only about 6 treasure away, which they should easily be able to spend next turn to do so. Okay, well that was unexpected because now there's some sort of drama that's happening at the Royal Dispatch Company. Something has happened to Ephraim Fellheart. Maybe he's gone missing from the Royal Dispatch Company for a brief time. We'll find out. But next up goes the Vidala. And the Vidala family, these cultists of Vargosh, are in Davenar. So they are removed from this faction battle that's going on in the city. But they're not out of the battle by any means. So they have a wealth of 4 and a combined cunning and force of 4. So they're going to gain 5 treasure, which is all the treasure they have. They currently have 3 assets. They have covert transport, they have blackmail, and they have occult countermeasures. Now, their goal is to discover Vargosh's resting place. If we look at the list of actions for a faction turn, we've got attack, move, repair, expand influence, create, hide, or sell. So is there an asset that they can create which is going to get them more information about where Vargosh's resting place is? Instead of worrying about that, why don't we just ask the fate chart if they've gained any information on the location of Vargosh's resting place? Because one of the things I want to make clear here is that these artifacts that they've been trying to gather and that the Crest have come across, they are pieces of Vargosh that were spread out from Elfheim. But there is a specific artifact that the Vidala family are searching for. Something that is close to, the core of what Vargosh was as this old god. And it is an artifact of great power. And I have an idea of where it's located, but I'm gonna ask the fate chart here if they have gained any information about that location, because they've been in Davenar for a little while, and Davenar, much like Heartvale, is a town where travelers come and go, and there's the opportunity for them to have heard rumors about effects that might match what they are looking for in this artifact. So we're going to ask the fate chart, and I think depending on our answer to this is probably going to depend on what the Vidala family do next in this turn. I'm going to say there's no way that they find any information on Vargosh's resting place here. But you know what? That's still a 35% chance. So let's see what happens. Let's roll the dice. Chaos rank of 7. 36, which is just barely a no. So no, they've not garnered any more information on Vargosh's resting place, which means that's what they're trying to do. Like, they're trying to find that information. Are they going to start recruiting seers? So they can recruit petty seers for 2 treasure, but it requires a magic level of medium, which they don't have. They have a low magic rating. And that's just because they're a small faction. Like, they are fairly powerful in magic from the standpoint of, like, Cleofa is a fairly powerful sorceress, and Mother Vidala is, although she hasn't shown it necessarily, also very powerful with magic. But there are only the 2 of them. They don't have a legion of various mages that can help them enact rituals. And I think that makes it easy for us to decide what our choice is here. They want to build an arcane laboratory to increase their magic rating so they can hire some seers to try and discern the location of Vargosh. And when I say hire seers, I mean, basically what I'm envisioning here is they're trying to build this arcane pool, and they have this temple, this base of influence in Davenar that they've built. And they're trying to enact rituals to draw on ancient knowledge to discover a location for Vargosh's resting place. Now, the problem with that is they only have 5 treasure, and they needed 6 to build the arcane laboratory. So they are stymied again as far as asset purchasing goes. So is there something else that they can do to get some more money? They could sell an asset, which would be selling either their covert transport or their blackmail or their countermeasures, or they could try and hire something else. Something that wouldn't be as expensive, that they would be able to gain more resources next time to start building this. So I think they are going to create an asset, and that asset is going to be a force asset, because I think they need some protection for this temple. And it could be fearful intimidation, which is the judicious exercises of force have intimidated the locals, making them reluctant to cooperate with any group that stands opposed to the faction. And I think this would fit for the local area that the Vidala are in, would basically now be under this reign of terror. Maybe they wouldn't even necessarily know why. That would cost 2, or they could hire some thugs for 2 or local guards. Thugs are weaker, but they are less expensive, of course, whereas local guards are going to have a little bit more oomph to them. And I'm thinking, eventually the Crest are going to show up. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to spend 3 of my 5 treasure and hire some local guards. And again, I say hire, but this is a cult after all. So I think Destrian Vidala is going out in the night and finding people who are hopeless and lost. Maybe, there are rumors of sickness that is going around in Davenar, and he is going out and telling them that if they pledge their allegiance to him, he will keep them safe. And maybe that's part of it, is those who are sick, they have these boils and this rotting sickness. When they pledge their allegiance to Destrian Vidala, those rotting, decaying bits of their flesh magically heal, and they are able to survive. So they are going to devote themselves to the protection of the Vidala family, something that they did not have before. And with 2 treasure left, we're going to leave that for next faction turn, and then they should be able to purchase that laboratory. So that's going to do it for the Vidala family. That leaves us with 3 more factions here. We've got the Drift. Their goal is to expand their influence, and they actually did that last time. So I should have given them some experience for that. So let's do that real quick before we start. So since it accomplished its goal, it's going to gain experience points, and that's going to be 1 plus 1 because it was contested. So it is going to be 2 experience points, and it is the first faction to gain some experience. And then it can pick a new goal. So its goal could be to inflict damage to another enemy faction, to destroy a foe, to eliminate a target, to expand the influence again, to destroy a force asset, to not attack anyone, to root out the enemy, sphere dominance by choosing a particular sphere, or much like the Royal Dispatch Company, Wealth of Kingdoms, they can spend their gold. What do the Drift want to accomplish? They are trying to build their influence in Heartvale. They're trying to make space for their way of life. And they were contested by both the council and the Kingsword. And if we look in our south scales where they built this location, there are DeSoto guards and individuals, and there are also Kingsword individuals. So I think their next goal is actually to eliminate a target. And eliminating a target for them is, I think, going to be the Hired Friends. Because Hired Friends grant a wealth asset the subtle quality. This quality will remain regardless of the wealth asset's movement until the Hired Friends are destroyed or they use this ability again. Yeah, so this represents the ability of the Council of 12 to basically move assets around, and because they tried to stop the drift from creating this base of influence, they're going to try and get rid of that. So that is going to be their goal for the next 3 turns, because that's as much time as they have. Then we're going to gain some treasure. So they get 3 wealth plus 10 is their combined cunning and force. So that is 2.5. So that'll be rounded up to 3. So they're going to get 6 treasure, which added to their 4 treasure that they have already will be 10 treasure. So they need something to unleash on these Hired Friends. And they're going to spend some treasure. I think this is a pretty easy faction turn for them. They are going to hire maybe some infantry. I feel like that's a relatively straightforward thing for them to do. So they are going to spend 6 to hire infantry. And next turn, they are going to use those on the Hired Friends, assuming those Hired Friends stick around. So they've spent 6 treasure. They have hired some infantry. Those are going to be located in the south scales as well. And next turn, they are going to unleash on the Hired Friends. That is the end of their turn. So we are going to resolve the crest and then finish off with Lord DeSoto. So the crest have 2 assets, informants and infantry. Now, I think I made a mistake here because I had 2 infantry units. I had one that had 4 out of 6 health, and I had one that had 6 out of 6 health. And I've kind of ruined the drama a little bit for the DeSoto because I wiped out the infantry unit that had 4 out of 6 hit points. So I'm going to correct that right now, and I'm going to reinstate one of those infantry units, and I'm just going to take its hit points down to 2 out of 6 to represent the attacks from the Royal Dispatch Company, because the other one that was at 4 out of 6 kind of represents Ben and Iron Gull and Arid and Orchid and those others who were at the Defara estate and were involved in the fight with Lord Defara. And the reason I want to correct that is because the Lord DeSoto, his goal is to eliminate that infantry, and this is his last turn to do it. So if he can't deal 4 harm to that infantry in this turn, then he is not going to succeed at that goal, and that's going to have repercussions going forward. Because I think what that means is that his anger is placated. He is no longer seeking to destroy them if he doesn't destroy them in this turn, and that goal lapses. So I'm going to reinstate one of the 2 infantries that the crest had. Now it has 2 out of 6 hit points because it was at full when it took that 4 from the Royal Dispatch Company. That's the one that I created last turn that is hanging out in and around the crow's nest. The other infantry has 4 out of 6 health, and that is the one that Lord DeSoto is going to try and kill. But it is the crest's turn first. So what can we do here? Let's gain some treasure first of all. So I've got a wealth of 2, and then I've got a combined cunning and force of 7. So that is going to give us 4 treasure to work with. The question, I think, is Captain Netheridge looking to solve this problem with conflict? Because if so, he should just outright attack the armed guards that have been harrying the crest members outside the crow's nest. But if he wants to maintain some measure of neutrality here, I think he's going to have to come at it from a different way. And I think he does want a level of neutrality because he's already being pressured by the Royal Dispatch Company. And if he can smooth things over with Lord DeSoto, then there is less of a chance that they're going to get run out of the city. So he just needs to make the infantry survive one more turn before this grudge that DeSoto has lapses. Which is a very game way of thinking about it, but I don't know that I really have any other option than to just try and hide the asset again. So it would give me the ability to spend 2 treasure to give that infantry the stealth quality, which would take it out of the view of those armed guards. But the DeSoto also have informers, and they could reveal it and then allow the armed guards to attack. The other option would be to move those crest. And I think that while that would solve the problem, quote unquote, I feel like it's more dramatic if we hide them and then see if the informers can root them out. Because we're already playing with the fiction here. Many of the individuals who were at that battle have already been moved outside of the city. They're in Valewater. And so we're playing a little fast and loose with the idea of attacks on different zones and stuff like that. And if this group of infantry does get wiped out, I think that means not so much that Ben and Arid and Orchid are going to be captured and drawn up before Lord DeSoto and executed, so much as I think there is a blood price that DeSoto is going to feel as though he has now been paid and that conflict is at an end. So I'm going to spend the 2 treasure to make that infantry asset stealthed. And that is my turn. I mean, that's basically it for them. So that leaves Lord DeSoto. Captain Netheridge is trying to shield his people enough that they can weather the storm until they're able to smooth things over with Lord DeSoto. So we're going to start the Council of 12, Lord DeSoto's turn. He gets 6 plus 2, so that is 8. Which is going to take his treasure up to 21 as well. He's immediately going to spend one of those to use his informers, and we're going to make a cunning versus cunning attack to try and reveal that stealthed unit. So cunning of 3 versus cunning of 3. Rolled a 1 for DeSoto and a 7 for the crest, which is a 10 versus a 4 when you add the cunnings in. All right, so that means that the informers are not able to find these members of the crest. And I think that Lord DeSoto isn't necessarily thinking of these things as him needing to attack the crow's nest itself. I don't know that he's looking to destroy the crest. I think he understands that they have a value. Again, he's looking for that blood price. That being said, there is another unit of infantry that has been injured, is he going to attack and unleash a certain amount of pain on them? It's possible. Maybe I should ask the fate chart. Is Lord DeSoto going to take out his anger on the Crest soldiers that he can find? I think it's very unlikely. 26 is a yes, actually. He is. So he's going to attack the other infantry. This will not fulfill the parts of the goal, but I think it will fulfill the fiction of that blood price that he is seeking. So his armed guards are going to attack the unstealthed infantry. So those armed guards are going to make a wealth versus force attack. Wealth of 6 plus the d10 is going to be a 9 because I rolled a 3 on the d10. And the Crest have a force of 4, but they get to roll their d10 twice. So 9 is the number to beat. Don't need to roll again. I rolled a 10 on the die, so that is a 14. So the infantry are able to fight back against these armed guards that ambush them. And I believe they're going to deal some counter damage. They're going to deal a d6 in counterattack damage, 1 damage to the armed guards. The guards have 3 hit points, so they are not wiped out, but they are bloodied a little bit. And once again, I think that means that this blood feud that DeSoto has is satisfied. He failed to destroy the group of infantry, and 3 turns have elapsed. Is he going to attack anyone else is the question, because he's already used the attack action with the armed guards. He could attack with the hired friends as well. Let's take a look at them real quick. So they could do a cunning versus cunning attack, but they would also open themselves up to the possibility of counterattack. Here's the thing. The Shade and the Lord DeSoto are not necessarily allies, but they're also not enemies. They basically want the same things, which is the good of the city. So is it possible that the Red Fox has clued DeSoto into the workings of the Kingsword? I'm going to say it's 50-50. Cast rank of 7, 8, which is an exceptional yes. So in this, they are allies. So I think that means that instead of unleashing the ire of his hired friends on the Crest, he's going to unleash that on the Kingsword pleaders. And so those hired friends are going to do a cunning versus cunning against the Royal Dispatch Company. So they have a cunning of 3, Lord DeSoto does. A 6 on the die is a 9 versus the Kingsword cunning of 5. And a 3 on the die is an 8. So he is successful against the pleaders. And that's going to deal 1d6 damage, which is 2 points of damage to our pleaders. And they have 4 hit points. So he doesn't destroy the pleaders, but he certainly deals some damage to them. And I think what that has to mean is that Lord DeSoto's friends, and these are probably merchants and lesser noblemen that are on his payroll, are starting to make some waves when it comes to the Royal Dispatch Company throwing their weight around in the town and trying to make demands on the council. And there is definitely some conflict there that is brewing. The last thing we need to do for Lord DeSoto and the Council of 12 is select a new faction goal. And I think we have a couple of options here, which is we could eliminate a target again, but this time on the Royal Dispatch Company, or we could have it be destroy them entirely, because I think we have to honor that extreme yes on the fact that the Red Fox sought out Lord DeSoto and told him about what was going on with the Royal Dispatch Company. So I think that his new goal is going to relate to that alliance between those two factions. So is it something as simple as eliminating a target, or is it about destroying the faction in general? Let's ask the fate chart. What is the goal here? Is it to destroy a particular asset that the Royal Dispatch Company has? Could it be to just finish the job and destroy the pleaders? I'm going to say it is 50-50. 66 is a yes. Yes, that's what it's about. So again, Lord DeSoto is not necessarily trying to destroy the Royal Dispatch Company in general, but this is going to be their new goal, which is eliminate. And I think we have to decide, is it the pleaders? Is it the manufactory that the Royal Dispatch Company built? Is it their ability to put out all of this information into the world? Well, there are currently 4 assets. There's the trade company, there are the useful idiots, there's pleaders, and there's the manufacturer. I don't feel like the useful idiots really factors into this. So I'm going to roll a d6, and on a 1 to 2, it's going to be about going after the company itself. If it's a 3 to 4, it's going to be going after the pleaders. And if it's a 5 to 6, it's going to be going after the manufactory. A 5. So it is about the manufactory. Eliminate the Kingsword manufactory. Probably should have made that goal before I decided who I was going to attack on the Kingsword, but I think we can work it out that the next turn will be the first of the 3 turns for that goal, since they had a goal coming into this turn. So that is the new goal of the Council of 12 as represented by Lord DeSoto, which is to eliminate the Royal Dispatch Company manufactory. Captain Netheridge feels the guard's eyes as he walks the corridors of the Duxit. He'd been trying to get this meeting for a couple weeks now, but it wasn't until the Red Fox showed up at his doorstep that he made any progress. She smiled in her mysterious way and ordered him to follow her. Netheridge usually didn't take orders, even from patrons, but there was something in her demeanor that allowed no argument. It had been a while since he left the crow's nest without a heavy guard, but she told him that not only would it be unnecessary, it would send the wrong message. After all, she said, you shouldn't be afraid of something ill befalling you when you are with me. As they passed through the scales on their way to the howl, he marveled at her lack of fear. Most nobles wouldn't be caught dead walking the streets alone. But she strode through the streets as though nothing in the world could touch her. She walked, even that was rare for a high noble of Heartvale. No palanquin for the Red Fox. Of course, as far as Netheridge knew, there were shade aplenty watching their passage through the streets. He needn't have worried. They passed into the howl and then through the gates of the Duxit without incident. She offered him access to the upper echelons of society in Heartvale, and he was becoming the sword she wielded against the city's enemies. It was most certainly a mutually beneficial and profitable arrangement. Lady von Triken leads him to an open staircase, and up a landing with more guards. Netheridge recognizes the livery of Lord De Soto. For a brief moment, he considers the possibility that she is trading him for an alliance with his lordship. But he is confident enough in their own partnership that he doesn't entertain it long. The guards also do him the courtesy of not asking for his sword, an even better sign. Lord De Soto's office is sizable, as befits a man of his station, and he sits in a chair by a small fireplace. He looks more pallid and frail than the last time Netheridge saw him at the unfortunate Defara party that sparked off this conflict. The captain half expects the nobleman to remain seated, but his lordship rises on their entrance. He greets Lady von Triken first, as befits her station. Then his weary eyes turn to Netheridge. "Captain Netheridge of the Crest," he says, and Netheridge senses the preparation that went into those words. "I regret the circumstances that have led to our conflict. I have gained the time and space to recognize that the man your soldiers killed was not my nephew, but some abomination that had destroyed him long before their blades pierced his flesh. I hope you can agree that enough blood has been shed between us, and we can have peace, so we may turn our attentions to more pressing matters." He extends his hand, and though it trembles a little, he waits for the mercenary captain to take it. Netheridge nods, having been prepared for this moment as well, and takes the hand. "Of course, my lord. We regret any loss of life, but the circumstances were unfortunate and exceptional. I have no desire to continue fighting against you or your people." "Excellent, gentlemen," the Red Fox says, clapping her hands together. "Now that this matter has been settled, we can turn our attention, as Lord De Soto alluded, to our real enemies, Ephraim Fellheart and the Vidala family. There is much to do." Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thank you so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or buy me a coffee at coffee.com/errantadventures. That's ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @errantsolopod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.